Good morning, everyone. Our Tuesday, May 16th, 2023 joint meeting of the Board of Education and Board of County Commissioners has now begun. This meeting is called to order. At this time, we'll do our agenda review. I'm going to ask, there's a closed session on our agenda about safety and security. I'm going to ask us to remove that for this evening. We need to consult with our attorney to figure out how we can make sure we do that session. Are there any other adjustments to the agenda? No other adjustments?
No, I was just going to make a motion if you need one. Are we going with?
If we can go with consensus, is that all right? Everyone feel? All right, we'll keep it moving. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from January 31st, 2023.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Chair Howerton, seconded by Commissioner Burns. I will open it for discussion. Commissioner Jacobs?
I just had one little correction, which was on page 3 in my comment. I referenced maternal health and it says internal health. So that's just a minor revision.
We'll make that revision. Is that okay? If we approve the minutes with those revisions, is that okay, Chair Howerton? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, use the same sign. Passes unanimously. Today's agenda is all focused on mental health. So many of us were at the Bull yesterday and have been thinking about and holding on to the young people who are really struggling right now. So wanted to spend some time on our agenda today, really digging into how we are supporting our young people and our students. So we'll have presentations from DPS as well as the Durham Public Schools Foundation. Before we get started, Dr. Mabinga did want to make a few comments.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all our board members here and our commissioners and staff from the county and DPS as well. Let me first of all say I'm really grateful. I've been here for 6 years. A really good relationship with my board and our county commissioners. So the work that we've been able to produce for the last 6 years, I had a team that's been able to work with me. 2 of those team members, they'll be leaving us soon, and I would like just to make that publicly. Dr. Monk, who has pretty much overseen our operation department for the last probably four years, is leaving us, heading back to Guilford County. It's going to be a big loss for us. I just wanted to make that announcement publicly. Dr. Monk, thank you for your work. The next person is Mr. Sadeth. All our parents and some of our county commissioners, they heard that voice quite often. Anytime there were announcement crisis, they heard the voice of Chief Sadeth. Chip has been around here for a long time. He pretty much was in the role before my time here, and we are definitely going to miss him. So, Chip, thank you for your service. While I still have the floor, I just want to take this point of privilege to say thank you to our county manager. I've been here for 6 years. I produced my 6th budget. Very excited to hear the first time that our manager was able to recommend us 100%. So I'm very grateful because we've been able to work together, say, I'm not going to bring you a wish list. I'm going to bring you a list with our needs. And she really honored that. And I hope and I pray our commissioners will support that as well. I just wanted to say kudos to our county manager.
Thank you, Dr. Mabinga. The board also is greatly appreciative and look forward to our continued work together. I know we share a lot of goals around making sure that we're paying our staff a living wage, making sure we're supporting the young people in our community. So I think we'll know that we'll have continued work together to get to those goals. So the first presentation is from Durham Public Schools. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Hardy and Dr. Laverne Maddox-Perry.
Thank you so much, Chair Umstead, Chair Howerton, our DPS Board of Education members, our county commissioners, the county staff, as well as DPS staff. We were really excited to hear the request to present to you today on our social and emotional programming, as well as student support services. Our Student Support Services Department is designed specifically to ensure the mental and physical health of our students. And once we get into presentation mode, if we'll go to the next slide. We'll go forward one more. Thank you so much. You can go back one. Thank you. This and all of our work in Durham Public Schools is guided by our DPS strategic plan. Our specific efforts to ensure mental and physical health of our school communities are directly tied to priority 1, increase academic achievement, and priority 2, provide a safe school environment that supports the whole child. Next slide, please. Priority 2 in our strategic plan ensures that we secure the mental and physical health of our students in a proactive approach and is grounded in the fabric of everything we do. Goal 2A focuses on our cultural frameworks, and 2B on excluding students out of school and reducing that in a very intentional manner. Next slide, please. We know that it may be easy to understand the work of many other departments in Durham Public Schools. Our Curriculum Instruction Department guides teaching and learning. The Operations Department ensures that our children get to school safely and they have nutritious meals every day. Student Support Services can be a little bit more ambiguous. So we want to spend a little bit of time highlighting the work of our overall department before we focus specifically on our mental and physical health initiatives. The mission of this department is to guide and empower schools to support the whole child. Next slide, please. This department is led by Senior Executive Director, Dr. Laverne Maddox-Perry. With her today, we also have Ms. Tamika Ward-Satterfield, who serves as Director of Student Wellness and Advocacy. In addition to our nurses, our school social workers, and our school counselors that you'll hear about a lot this afternoon, the department also houses educators that specialize in behavior support, students experiencing homelessness or foster care, hospital, school, and homebound teachers, crisis response, and our multi-tiered system of supports that integrates interventions to support students in all areas. This variety of expertise allows this department to be both focused and nimble as we guide schools to support the whole child. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Maddox-Perry.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Good morning. As we shift, let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. As we shift to focus on our topic of discussion for today, let's clarify mental health. Mental health is a widely used term that can have several meanings. We will use the definition from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to ensure we are all on the same page as we discuss the mental health resources available in Durham Public Schools. In Durham Public Schools, we recognize there is no aspect of life that is unaffected by our mental health. Our definition: mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act, and helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Next slide, please. Our tiered support and approach to mental health resources mirrors our approach to academic instruction and intervention. At the Tier 1 level, our cultural frameworks, which are based on restorative practices, and our social emotional learning curriculum create a foundation that is preventative and fosters awareness of mental health concerns. Next slide. Our schools employ one of 3 cultural frameworks that structure the school climate and how everyone in the school community relates to one another and will be treated. These frameworks all have a restorative foundation. The fundamental hypothesis of restorative practices is that human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make changes, positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. Next slide, please. All our schools have selected and are implementing a research-based social emotional learning curriculum that is designed to give students and adults the tools and strategies needed to enhance their understanding and confidence in using the 5 social emotional learning, what we call SEL competencies: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. Schools, considering their unique communities and needs, develop a schedule that allows students to participate in regular SEL lessons. In addition to teaching the 5 competencies, these lessons create opportunities for mental health check-ins as well as community building within the class and school. To continue with our tiered approach is Ms. Ward Satterfield. You join me?
Thank you and good morning. While our Tier 1 services that are available to all students are the foundation of our work, we recognize, next slide, please. We recognize that just like with academic intervention, some of our students will need more targeted SEL and mental health support and services. As a result, we have a wide range of staff and community partners that are available to assist students and families when additional needs are identified. Next slide. Our building level student support services teams are comprised of a variety of skilled educators, and the teams are usually anchored by professional school counselors, school social workers, and school nurses. We wanted to take this opportunity to remind the community that our school nurses and social workers have at least a bachelor's degree, and our school counselors have at least a master's degree. All of our educational professionals are licensed by NCDPI and participate in ongoing professional development catered to their specific areas of expertise. As you can see, there is some overlap in those services that are provided by our student support services staff. So communication and collaboration are very important to ensure effective service to all our students. Next slide, please. Here, we can see that access to school counselors is most convenient for all students because we have at least one full-time school counselor in every school. The ratio of school counselors to students is 1 to 274 and 1 to 805 for our school social worker to student ratio. We have 10 mental health counselors provided by ESSER funds, and Lakeview has an additional mental health counselor position. Next slide. The pandemic highlighted the important role of school nurses and the role that they play in the holistic well-being of all of our students. Next slide. It is essential to highlight that our school counselors and social workers work with students on a wide variety of issues every day. This list, while not exhaustive, does provide a good idea of the types of concerns our students bring to school and have to manage or overcome before they maximize their learning potential. Next slide. Even though our counselors and social workers provide brief one-on-one and small group therapy, there are some students that require more long-term and intensive therapy. We serve these students at the Tier 3 level through our co-located mental health program. Next slide. Co-located mental health services provide therapy to students within the school day by partnering with local mental health providers. This structure can help reduce the amount of time missed from work and school to ensure students receive the necessary mental health services. The number of referrals continues to rise each year, and our community agencies have raced to hire clinicians and other staff to meet the increasing needs. At the end of the third quarter of this school year, we had already received an increase of 111 total referrals, with 1 quarter left in the school year. In addition to the 6 comprehensive agencies that provide therapists to support our students, DPS partners with an additional 2 more specialized agencies that provide targeted support for students whose primary language is Spanish and students who are classified as non-Spanish speaking immigrants. As awareness of access to these mental health supports increases, so does the need for Spanish-speaking therapists. Our agencies are attempting to meet that need by hiring bilingual staff and clinicians, but these professionals are in short supply within the state. We continue to brainstorm ways to ensure language is not a barrier throughout the continuum of our co-located mental health services. Next slide. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this year's theme from the National Alliance of Mental Illness is More Than Enough, which is meant to remind us that of our inherent value and worth, no matter our diagnosis, appearance, socioeconomic status, background, or ability. In Durham Public Schools, we believe our students are more than enough and worthy of mental health support to ensure they can ignite their limitless potential. Now, I will turn it back over to Dr. Maddox Perry.
In summary, DPS has a wide variety of mental health resources for students and staff, and we are continually adding more. We also partner with community agencies to help spread the word about resources available to families. We continue to build this internal and external network to shore up our tier 1, 2, and 3 services for students. Next slide, please. This year, oh yes, those are some of the resources. Next slide, please. This year, we celebrate the expansion of social emotional learning curriculum to all students in grades 6 to 12, making social emotional learning curriculum available for all students in Durham Public Schools from K through 12. We are also excited about the support that we will receive from the Stop the Violence Grant and the director who will be working with our schools, as well as the Whole Schools Initiative grants from Durham Public School Foundation. As we work to implement these grants, we expect to increase awareness of mental health supports that are available to students and families. We're also working with some of our community partners to increase access to youth mental health first aid training. Our nurses have had that training, and we're expanding that to more support staff. And we also want to create a plan to ensure an efficient and more thorough crisis response to all our schools. At this time, I will yield back to Dr. Hardy.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox Perry and Ms. Tamika Ward Satterfield. If we'll go to the next slide, please. Our approach to overall wellness and particularly social, emotional, and mental health includes preventative, proactive, responsive services to DPS students and communities. The emphasis on the whole child illuminates the moderate successes possible in supporting each and every young person, knowing fully that there is always more work for us to do. At this time, we are open to questions and discussion. I'll turn it back over to Chair Howerton and Chair Umstead.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy and the team for that presentation. I appreciated how y'all layered the data in with also what we're doing and some of the areas that we need to continue to grow in, right? Making sure students are aware of supports, communication, bilingual staff, really thorough presentation. I'll open the floor to questions. I'll start with Chair Howerton, and we'll go to Commissioner Jacobs.
I think it's on. It's on. I just want to say thank you for putting this presentation together. We have had a lot of conversation around mental health, and this morning, first thing this morning, I got to watch Barack Obama on a news special. He was talking about My Brother's Keeper and the gun violence, and he mentioned that he didn't talk a lot about mental health, and he said that gun violence have more to do with how the elected officials are letting this happen across the country. That mental health is an issue, but it's not the main issue. It's guns that are the main issue. And I bring that up because of the highlight that he was showing around My Brother's Keeper and how the young people are really focusing on their productivity and the schools. So it was a great presentation to talk about how it's not always mental health, the way we in this country focus on it. And we know that mental health is a problem. Thank you. Just wanted to mention that.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation, and this discussion couldn't be timed any better with the event, last night. And something that I've been wanting us to talk about for a long time. So it's really good to hear what the existing resources are. I would really like to better understand, I know you showed us the data about what our current ratio is, but I would really like to better understand what that really means in terms of like, what is the recommendation of what those ratios should actually be, and where are we at with that? And also, really understanding where are the gaps. The other thing I was concerned is to see that the mental health counselors are ending at the end of June, that were being funded by the ARPA dollars, and to understand what is the plan for that. When I went to see the state of urgency, one of the staff who was providing those services came up to me and said, I don't have a job at the end of the year, and I'm really concerned for our students not having access to these services. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up that I would like to know more about. The other is great. I love seeing, the curriculum and then the things that are planned. The training related to the mental health first aid, just really how many people, how many people are going to really be able to be served by that? Because I don't know if you've seen the state behavioral health action plan. The state came out with that recently, and it really focuses on training teachers, training students, because we know that a lot of times the first point of contact is going to be kids who are talking to each other when they bring up something, or a student interacting with a teacher. So I really think that training is very important. And then I know Alliance, when we had talked, was supposed to present. I think it's important that we understand what are the resources out in the community, because, there's what's happening in the schools, and then obviously what's happening. We know everything is bigger than it's connected to the family and the neighborhood and the world. But what are the resources that we have? And Alliance is actually increasing some of their investments for children and youth. So I think it's important that everybody knows about it. And also, I saw the reference to school nurses. I think the connection to physical health and mental health, we should be talking about both at the same time. They're so linked. And I know we do have a few health clinics. And so I'd like to hear more about the other resources that we have. And then I know I'm throwing a lot of things out here for further discussion. The last thing is just, I saw the comment about trying to work on awareness and communication. My biggest takeaway from recent conversations with youth, with kids voting Durham, then Jordan High School invited us, was that it just seems like there's a big disconnect between what resources are actually there and how students access them. And what the trajectory of how things actually work. So I think it's important for us to really understand, how is the system that we have in place really working and not working. And I just want to say, this absolutely should be a partnership between the city and the county, and something that we really dig into. I heard the Surgeon General speak at our legislative conference. Now, 1 out of 4 middle school girls have considered suicide. This is a huge crisis. And the way we reacted to COVID as a health crisis, we should be reacting the same way and keeping laser focused on this and also making sure that we have the right investments. And so I don't want this to be the only discussion. I really think this should be an ongoing discussion between our boards over the next year.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs. You did throw some questions out there, and I think we have some responses for sure. I'll start with Dr. Hardy and her team.
Thank you. I know we were all taking notes on all of the questions, so there is a possibility as we're responding, we may have missed something. So if so, we would ask that you provide us a little grace and share those questions with us. I want to start just in regards to staffing and the mental health counselors that are have been funded by ESSER. We have worked collaboratively with the Office of School Leadership Services, our Human Resource Department, and Finance, more importantly, our principals in terms of allocation of those resources and making sure that schools are using those dollars for the resources they need. So although you have seen a reduction maybe in that particular position, knowing that our principals are being very thoughtful about how they're using those federal dollars and then working very carefully with their supervisor in the school community to make sure the needs of the students are met. In terms of our school nurses, want to, agree with you in terms of how we make sure we take care of physical and social and emotional health. One of the things that we noted during our pandemic was the decline in immunizations. I think you saw that not only locally here in Durham, but across the country. And knowing that that is a manner of preventative health for our young people, that often that physical health can contribute to one's social and emotional and mental health and well-being. Really am pleased with the work under Dr. Maddox Perry's leadership and our lead nurse, Nurse Howard, and really working to make sure that we are getting our immunizations back on track for all of our young people. We do have those requirements at the grade levels for entry, but really making sure as a community, we're starting to build our comfort level to see our physicians and really to take care of that preventative wellness. So know that that is also a partnership in addition to the health clinics that we have at Hillside and Southern that are also helping us not only with our immunizations, but also vaccinations. And then lastly, before I turn it over to Ms. Ward Satterfield and Dr. Maddox Perry, you asked initially about staffing and those ratios. Know that it's been a priority of our board, as you could see with the adoption in 2020 of our addendum strategies to our current strategic plan. We had a highlight focus on our school counselors to make sure that we were getting closer to that ratio of 1 to 250, which is the national ASCA model. As you can also see in the draft of the updated strategic plan that we are currently working with our board on, you will see that in priority 2, there are several strategies that are explicit to the areas that you mentioned: mental health and SEL, student wellness, cultural frameworks, our social emotional learning curriculum, and last but certainly not least, attendance, knowing that when we have our children in our care, we can then make sure that we're providing some of the best resources that they need and that our families need.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Thank you for the questions and your interest in our work and this work. I do believe it is some of the most important work that we can do in a school system. And so some of the questions that really stuck out for me are the things that keep me up at night. And that is when I hear students say, I did not know this existed. As much as our efforts are trying to utilize the tiered approach, sometimes that means when a student is at tier 2 and really in need of something, they have not yet heard about it, or they have not yet had that referral happen. So we've been brainstorming ways to kind of fill that gap, because it can happen in a lot of ways. Sometimes it can be a traumatic event that brings about the need for additional support, or it can be something that manifests itself over a series of years. So those are the things that we are communicating with our team about. We're really excited. As you can see, it's really a thorough type of team that now integrates in school nursing. And so as a professional learning community, those leaders in student services are constantly asking, we call it the ABCs. We're looking at academic, behavioral, and physical as well as what happens in the classroom and the culture around our schools. So in increasing our partnership with public affairs as well, to make sure some of the initiatives not only go to schools and to those within the organization, we are trying to increase our outreach, and our STOP grant partnership will help with that to families directly. So those are the gaps that come to mind immediately, as well as the ratios. Oftentimes we get concerned by the numbers. We're proud, and Ms. Ward Satterfield can elaborate on this, but we're proud that at a ratio of 1 to 274, it is very high. And we'd like to see that more in balance with the ASCA recommendation, the premier Association for Counseling, School Counseling, to 1 to 250. So we're working towards that. And that is a consistent focus of our strategic plan, not only strategies, but activities.
Before Ms. Ward Satterfield jumps in, the recommendation from ASCA is 1 to 250, but I want to be clear that the state doesn't fund at that ratio. I'm sure Mr. Paul Lasore can let us know what the ratio is that they fund. We've been grateful that with our partnership with you all, we've been able to work that number down. And we've also used some of our federal funds to help work that number down. But in this continued conversation, we'll need more collaboration, because there'll be some local funding that'll have to sustain those positions past what we get from the state. Anything to add, Paul?
Yes. I don't have the number right offhand, but I think it's like, they fund us 1 to 210. But understand, that's not for counselors. That's for social workers, counselors, psychologists, and anything else we need to have for instructional support. So it's not like they're giving us the necessary funding from that standpoint.
I remember hearing before it was 1 in 400 for counselors is what they fund. And I'm not sure what it is for social workers, and that ratio was even larger from the data I saw.
Yes. Let Ms. Ward Satterfield continue, and then we'll come back around.
And to the question, what do the ratios look like? I think the clearest way to state that is each school has a school counselor that can be embedded in that community. For our school nurses and our school social workers, they travel to 2, sometimes 3 or more schools. And so it is very difficult, right, to be embedded in that school community. So that can just give you an idea of what it looks like. To the question about youth mental health first aid and the teen mental health first aid training, in April, we were able to have over 30 of our student support services staff and district staff trained in the youth mental health first aid, with the idea that some of those people would go on to be able to become trainers to expand our capacity. We have a fantastic collaboration with Durham Technical Community College, the DPS Foundation, and the Volunteer Medical Corps to also expand those people who are available to conduct that training, with the idea that we'll start at the school level with some of our affinity groups, some of our advisors who touch students really directly in that intimate sort of extracurricular setting, so that we can grow to having students trained in the teen mental health first aid model as our adults are trained in the youth mental health first aid model.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Commissioner Burns and then Ms. Valladares.
I pile on the congratulations with the rest of my colleagues. And also, I just want to shout out, before I even do that, I'm so happy that you were focusing on immunizations. Just finished up Elevate NC with the Hunt Institute about post-secondary education. And one of the things that we talked about in Georgia, 27% of kids that applied to college, got in, put down their seat money, did not go to school, didn't go to any school. And they were like, well, why didn't you go to any school? And they were like 14 reasons why. In the top 3, one was immunizations. It just was like, that was a blockade for them. And to say to a kid, well, you got to turn these records in before you come here. If that kid did not have the resources to do it these first 18 years, kind of sort of throwing it back didn't really help. So they're being a little bit more proactive on the university stage and making sure that kids are getting in there. I'm just happy that we're doing it here, because I think that there are these things, these small things that we really don't think about that are like blockades to college. So kudos to y'all for even mentioning that. And kids did get off of their immunization education track, during COVID. So however we can be supportive, that just really hit me hard because I think it's one that we take for granted. I did want to go back because it made talk about not just the nurses and the school counselors and the social workers, but them as an aggregate. I'm thinking back to the last meeting that we had with Dr. Mubinga, and you talked about how many kids were graduating with degrees in education at NCCU or any of our surrounding institutions, and just how low it was. I want to kind of sort of ask to some of the experts in the room. We all know that right now the General Assembly, public education is under attack, the counseling profession is under attack, social work is under attack. It just is. These bills don't even make any sense. And so even if we, I want to make sure that we're giving you all what we need. I'm just wondering, is the market right now, are we seeing these graduation rates so low and we can't fill some of these positions? Like what's something that y'all are dealing with? Is it like the teachers where we got to go out of the country now? Because I know you all got 33 teachers somewhere else. So is the market low? And also, are we paying a market rate, or are we getting priced out by somebody privately?
Commissioner, that's a loaded question.
Well, I'm trying to get in trouble today, Dr. Mubinga.
No problem. We'll be glad to provide a response to that as well. I know my team, they're gonna jump in as well. I recall a couple years ago, you guys were able to give us funding for additional 10 nurse positions. And we still have those positions open. Because whatever we offer here, there are private sectors where they will pull a nurse with a signing bonus of $20,000 or things of that nature. We cannot match that. So that's the struggle that we're still facing. I'm going to let our HR and student services respond to that specific question, but I'll say this. I like what Commissioner Jacob said. We receive about $150 million with SR funds. The fund will expire very soon. Are we going to be able to sustain all those positions locally? I don't think so. So that's where we have to leverage with all these partners that we have. Emily K, community in the school and things of that nature, whatever city have in place. So I will urge us really to be around the table as we get into the point where all these funds are going to go and the needs are still going to be here. How are we going to leverage all the support that we have in the community to make sure that we continue addressing those social, mental, emotional needs of our students? So that partnership needs to be ongoing. We all know what's happening now in Raleigh. That support may not come over there. Yes, we still have to hold them accountable. But in the meantime, while we have the needs, we need to be really leveraging the support that we have locally. So Tim, can you give that specific to the question of Ms. Burns?
Good morning. I will jump in with one piece quickly from HR. First of all, I thank you for your question, and I will say we will go to the ends of the earth to recruit people who are committed to working in Durham with our students. I know we can speak about just what the labor market is and all of those pieces, but I want to add, and I want to commend the student services team, because one of our greatest recruitment tools, when you go to job fairs and different things like that, we have to get them early with internships when they have to do their practicum. And we have found that one of the best recruitment tools is if we bring them here and hook them with working with the experts that we already have in the field and have them working with our students. That is probably our number one best recruitment tool. And so I commend the student services team for accepting those opportunities. And we are strategically looking for more of those opportunities to help fill positions.
Yes, exactly. We have a number of partnerships with local universities that send us interns for all of our areas. That is amazing. We are in hiring season now. We have found interest in Durham Public Schools from people locally, but across the state, across the United States that are relocating to this area. So that is exciting. One barrier in hiring, especially for social workers, is that the state does not recognize master's pay for social workers that have master's degrees. And just like Dr. Mubinga addressed with our nurses, there are some things we just can't compete with, right, in the private sector. So we try to ensure that the culture is fantastic in our buildings, that the professional learning that they receive when they're here is they feel fulfilled by that and motivated by that to keep them here with us when we're able to hire them.
Thank you. I'm gonna swing to Ms. Valladares. Any other, I'm gonna go to Commissioner Carter and I'll come back. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I just wanted to lift up, just all the different pieces, how everything comes together because we need to support our youth. In conversations with a lot of young people, one of the biggest needs is conflict resolution. You don't get to conflict resolution without having the needed supports. I really commend what our chair of the county commission, Brenda Howerton, mentioned in terms of being able to address root causes, guns. Conflict is at the heart of a lot of what is happening and what is taking our kids' lives. And I do have something I want to share because I've been in conversation with not only young people, but also Latin 19 is definitely working on addressing gun violence. And there's on June 17th, there's going to be a meeting that is going to bring in public health and doctors, providers, folks who are looking at this in their clinics, in the hospitals, and talking to the youth and getting a lot of important feedback. Many of them are also working with community health workers who are families, who are DPS families. That is a wonderful opportunity for our families to provide direct information about some of the needs of the community and what is the community saying, where are we not seeing, or serving those needs. And so I just invite us to continue to address the root cause and continue to bring all these pieces together. But on the end of restorative practices, you knew I was going to say this. You knew it. I always say it. Just lifting up the work of Indigenous communities. We are in a very unique position in North Carolina to have 8 tribal nations, all of whom are experts in circle practice, restorative. This is their work. For eons, they've been doing circles. And we can buy the International Institute of Restorative Practices that doesn't really have connection with Indigenous communities. They learn from these communities, and that was documented in the Yukon territory, but they're not in an accountable relationship. And so we continue to use those definitions and use the books, but we're missing the spirit of the work, which is actually relationship. And this is something that was said from them. From our end, this comes from practitioners who are leading this work through Restore Circles. And they're saying if schools want to build loving environments of inclusion with students, their families, faculty, staff, and communities, we believe that circles support the creation, maintenance, and development of that kind of environment. Within that environment, when conflict occurs, it is not the result of difference, but rather a human function of development, of people working out what they need to learn about so that they can heal and have wonderful, productive lives. Circles then are practices that advance human development and make true the promise of public education. They become as critical for the enactment of education as blackboards, teachers, and other elements of a school. Restorative approaches are all about building community and strengthening relationships. Restorative approaches are based on the idea that when we feel a part of a supportive community, we respect others in that community and become accountable to it. And that last piece comes from Edutopia. I mean, they get it, this is about relationship. Any definition about restorative practices needs to have at the center relationships of accountability. And so there's more work about this, but I do think that in talking to the youth, they do mention not being in relationship in their school buildings, just feeling like there's no one in that school that actually cares enough. And there's a lot of stereotypes and judgment, kids that are being called gang members when they're actually not. But we continue to pretty much preach that to them and saying, you are. We continue to guide them into the school to prison pipeline. We continue to, think about families that are working single parent homes that need a village and they don't have that village, right? And so how do we continue to work with community partners? How do we bring in practitioners, elders, people who may be retired? We have volunteer opportunities, but we haven't really figured out how DPS and the county, because this is going to take county work, is really going to address the kids who may have brought a gun to school and are now needing supports, needing, the kinds of relationship and the kinds of interventions that are actually putting at the heart the importance of relationships and who do they relate to? If they're relating to their peers, we're lost, especially if their peers are not in a good place to lead them, right? Or to guide them to good choices. So how do we increase relationships with positive people, with elders, with grandparents who, I see so many grandparent groups. We need to leverage them, we need to bring them in our buildings. And so I just want us to continue working on this. And I commend my colleague, Giovanna and Bettina, for representing us yesterday at the event. And all the support and all the ways that, we're allowing youth voices to speak to us. And I also just want to put out that there's going to be on the 17th of June, an event with Latin 19, with La Semilla, with El Foro de Padres, with Watu. We are the ones. And anybody else who wants to be a part of that. We appreciate you. Thank you.
I also wanted to thank Dr. Satterfield for your presentation and for all of your work. And golly, I need to have blinders on or something so that every time I turn around, I don't see myself right there. I do feel like this work has been ongoing for at least 18 years that I've been connected to policymaking in the education realm. And I wanted to say how much I appreciate the leadership of this Board of Education for bringing it even further, trying to recognize that there's a tremendous need in our schools among the children and the families for behavioral health and mental health support services. My very first year on the school board in 2004, I served on the School Health Advisory Council, the SHAC. I don't know whether those are still in existence, but I remember the number one request of principals, and it happened every single year, was for more support for mental health and behavioral health needs of our students. So thank you so much for, carrying the conversation forward, but doing so in a more effective way. Back then, we didn't really talk as much about root causes and prevention. It was more just addressing the crisis. And I see you all trying to do it all to address the crises as they happen, but also focus on prevention and intervention and the different levels of intervention, your tiered approach. So I think that's great. We have a lot of work to do, as does everyone across this whole entire nation. And it is interesting, Brenda, how we try to attack the gun violence problem, at the school level, at the community level, around mental health. But I love what you brought forward about what Obama said. I mean, I think often when we went to the play at Hillside and they were asking, what can we do? What can we do? Well, all the things that everyone is trying to do, we need to keep working at and are great. But honestly, as long as there's more than one gun per person in this country, it's going to be an uphill battle. And we also need to regulate guns in the same way that we regulate other items of mass destruction, like cars and cigarettes. There are such common sense regulations we could put in place. Sorry, I ramble a little bit. I wanted to also say how much progress I feel like has been made with restorative practices, another topic that we talked so much about for the decade and 2 years I was on the school board, and just, thank you for really operationalizing and actualizing those, what were goals at the time. And I know you're continuing to make progress with that. I wanted to agree with Wendy about wanting to understand more how we can effectively increase our effectiveness at partnership with Alliance and the system of care that we have in Durham County. The system of care was like the panacea that we would lift up as school board members when I was there, for how we're going to deal with suspension, challenges, and we're going to get our numbers down, and how we're going to deal with all of the behavioral needs of students. It was going to be through the system of care. And I just wonder, is that still alive and well and active? And at that time, we also had co-located mental health services. I think they were just called school-based mental health services, but there was a portal of entry into this system of care through those co-located services. And I'm wondering if that is still happening. Wake County has what they lift up often as a true, fully formed school-based mental health program with Alliance. I'm on the Alliance board, so I've only heard a little about it, but it does make me want, and they will acknowledge Durham is doing some good things, but it's not this full grown program. And maybe that is something that we could all explore together as you guys continue to do great work in this realm, and maybe there's even more that we could do to sort of systematize the efforts with Alliance. I was surprised to see that 27 nurses, and I'm really sorry to hear we haven't been able to fill those 10 positions. Are there 10 other positions that would be easier to fill that would also have this sort of clinician, background? Is it any easier to fill social worker positions or counselor positions? It doesn't sound like it is, but for God's sake, if it is, let's just get the people in the building that have a clinical background of some sort.
So I will
Yeah,
respond
thank
to
you.
that a little bit. I do think that we definitely utilize targeted responses to based on what the position is, whether it's the universities we target or other outlets. We have been successful. I'll give you an example. In the nurses arena, without getting too scientific, there are certifications requirements that makes it a little more difficult for us to hire nurses at a rate that they can get in outside of education. And so one of the things that we've done is we actually go ahead and pay with a local differential, the difference in that while they're still working on getting those final things completed. And so that has helped us tremendously in filling the nursing positions. And so we are willing to look at whatever strategies we can to be able to fill those positions. I can't really say that when you're looking at the connection to health and in the clinical fields, it's equally competitive. I don't think that changing a title or looking at another job is going to be what helps us fill those positions.
That makes good sense, what you're saying, Dr. Lassane. Thank you for that. Nita has a great idea that she raises up about nurses a lot. And maybe we should use your idea, Nita, to, have a pipeline from Durham Tech to all the entities that need nurses. Maybe we should have a school nurse pipeline, really focused on that. Because Durham County has really put money forward to try to decrease our ratio of nurse to student, or increase it, whichever is the good one, lower the number of students per nurse. And so it's really important we hire those nurses. No, I know you all know that, but yeah, any creative, I just wanted to lift up Nita's really good idea, might be appropriate here. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate all the work.
Okay, thank you. There's so many things that have been said already, but I just want to lift up a couple. And one is regarding the community and how the community participate with the school, because I'm getting calls and that community want to participate. They want to create programs, and we'll probably hear something about this from our DPS Foundation. But how is the community being able to participate with the school and not violate any kind of rules? Because I know that their DPS have rules about how things are to be done. And there's probably maybe some people listening that really want to access working with the children around mental health in the community. So I'd like to hear more about that. And one of the things that has not been, I haven't heard mentioned is, there's still a stigma. There's still a stigma around mental health. Now, the little ones might not have it, but their parents have it. And I'd like to hear, is that something that's being addressed? Restorative justice, all for it. Thank you for lifting that up. I remember that being a conversation years ago, and it's good to hear that that's being practiced today. And I think those are the couple of things I'd like to hear more about, the connection between the community and how citizens are creating mental health programs that are connecting with the schools. And is the stigma conversation being addressed?
I'll just share while you all get ready. I think our students are much more practiced in having this conversation than some of the adults. We have seen our students form their own groups, own alliances, and say, we need more mental health support. I want counseling. And so I think that we are seeing, as far as our students are concerned, some shifts in that conversation. They probably could talk circles around us and kind of the needs and supports that they have, and they're explicit about asking questions on when they need things. But I'll pass that over to you all.
Yeah, in terms of the stigma around seeking mental health support and even revealing mental health diagnoses, just in the last 5 years, I have seen an increase in the openness. I think as a result of the pandemic and all of the healthcare agencies coming out and saying, be expecting this, and parents and students themselves are recognizing that things are different. I think also some of the work with cultural frameworks and SEL curriculum, having students learn about what it means to have a good relationship building skill, what it means to make good, responsible decisions, what it means to have an awareness of your own emotions, and being able to talk about that in a routine way with classmates and adults has helped students recognize sometimes when things just are not right. Or when they need an additional support. So I think the stigma still exists in some communities more than others, but as we continue to partner with agencies, Durham Public School foundations, we're getting more and more parent information forums and parent information brochures, sessions, websites that all help parents understand that the resource, it would be the same thing if your child had a broken foot or a broken finger. You would definitely want to seek some resources to remedy that. And the same is true when someone may have a broken heart or may have some trauma.
I'm gonna take last comments and then we're gonna wrap this up because we got another presentation. Dr. Sowell.
So mine will be very quick, but just really want to appreciate this conversation. And it takes me back to a program that our staff planned during our National County Government Month, and our Chief Communications Officer and her team led that effort. And it really solidified for me what I wanted to do for the community, but I couldn't wrap my hands around what is it that I don't have kids in school, so I'm not as engaged as I used to be. And what we did was brought together, it was a partnership with some of our mentoring organizations. We brought them to our facility and had a conversation. We called it Celebrating the Future Women Leaders. And we did the same thing with males. And we got to explain to them what we do. A lot of our children don't know that municipal government, and government in general is a great career path. So we wanted to expose them to the different careers that are available in government. But what was most impressionable for me was how they kind of hung on every word that we spoke. Our commissioners were there, some of our executive leaders were there, and you could see the excitement and the hope that they were gathering based on our conversations. And then we allowed them to ask questions of us. And some of the questions they were asking were just so insightful and profound. I thought, man, we have so much to offer to our young people. We have got to do this on a consistent basis. So I've already spoken to staff. If they haven't reached out to DPS staff, they will be. But this is something that we want to make a standing conversations. We want to take it. We don't want them to just come to us. So I've asked that we go out to the schools and we have these conversations with our young people at the schools, so that though you're right, they can't get answers from their peers. But we have some answers. We have some things and tools that we can provide to them to equip them with how to live a successful life, put the guns down, and how we can live a successful life. So I want you all to know, at the risk of going quicker than we wanted to, I wanted this group to be aware of this because I think it is absolutely critical to our partnerships.
Thank you, Dr. Sowell. That's amazing. I think every time I run into our young people, I realize how hungry they are, and they are eager to learn and to grow and to take what they can get from everyone and then forge their own path, right? They are truly forging their own path. I'm gonna let School Board Member Byer go, and then we'll pass it to Ms. Lewis, and then I'm gonna wrap this conversation up.
Yeah, no, I just want to express gratitude to you all for bringing this to our agenda. This is such an important commitment, shared values for us and both of our boards. And I hope that in the future, real quickly, we'll bring you kind of what our ratios are in each school so that you can see that what the state allots is not enough, that we can show you what we aspire to. I do think social workers and nurses should be funded at one per school if we can in Durham, right? At least so that we don't have folks traveling around, but there's always someone in the building because crises occur all the time. And I hope that kind of data we can bring to you all and share with you all real quickly. So, because it gives us you all the picture that I think is will help as we continue these conversations. I mean, I hope in the future we can bring you some more on the Stop the Violence grant. I think we talked about that real quickly, but we have new federal funding for that. And I think that's something that our board is really, really excited about sharing. And I did talk with our lead nurse, Nurse Howard, and she has done some great work recruiting nurses and actually filling a lot of the positions that are in DPS, and had some ideas that she, I think, would love to share with your HR staff as y'all are trying to recruit. Those public health nurses are still with you all, right? They're not. Yeah. So I know that she would welcome that conversation. She really tried to reframe the job as school-based and actually having a family friendly focus, and was able to recruit and fill a lot in those ways, as well as some other kind of qualitative aspects that went along with compensation. So thank you all for bringing this to our agenda and continuing the conversation with us in the coming months. I think it's so, so important. Thank you.
Thank you again for this presentation to our staff. Thank you, Dr. Maddox Perry, for continuing to keep the youth informed from last night at the Day of Remembrance. I would just say that, perception is reality. And what we heard the youth say from their perception is that they didn't know about the resources. So right there, that we know there's a gap, and Dr. Maddox Perry did very well in talking about all the things that we do offer as resources, but we know there's a gap to making sure the kids know this, that the youth have this information. And they also acknowledge that there's not just a perception of gap, there is a gap. There's only one counselor, and today my counselor may not be in. And what happens when I have an episode and I need help in this moment? And I think that allows us to know, how do we bring in the community? Thank you, Commissioner Carter, for saying, how can we be creative? We didn't fill these 10 positions for nurses, but what other things can we do? I didn't know if Dr. Maddox Perry would speak to this, but we have, other positions such as high school success coaches, behavioral interventionists, those type of roles that we need to continue to fill that may require a high school diploma or a bachelor's degree, but people who have just a heart for service in social services and human resources in that capacity. So I think we need to continue to build those capacities as well, because if every child just have one caring adult, and that could be that caring adult in that person. So there are some creative things that's already happening. But it's important to show up and hear from the youths. And that's what the Day of Remembrance was about on yesterday. We have all these great conversations and presentations, and we know what's happening, but how is it impacting and affecting the youth? And that's what we did on yesterday, to show up and to listen. So it's important that we do continue to center. And I want to appreciate our commissioners who helped to organize and come up with ideas and plans to be a part of this day, because they can come to our board meetings anytime. They already know this, but to see their county commissioners and city council and Dr. Soul, let me finish that sentence. That was important to them. But the excitement that you just shared excited me. And I think that what you heard from them is their brilliance, and we do have to listen to and let them lead. I had a community conversation and pushed in on the same things and got the same kind of feedback. And even before my conversation, the school, the student support services, they were planning to push in after the Hillside State of Urgency presentation. Dr. Maddox Perry and I talked about that. And of course, other things came up, other things happened, but that is part of the plan. I look forward to our strategic plan 2.0 that is being developed right now with some of these additional insights impact that we will be centering student supports and wellness with a comprehensive plan that is really that we're tracking our student wellness and meeting those needs. And the last thing I just want to share, and this is from everyone's conversations and comments that you had. I appreciate the mental health training for our youth is very important. I want to say that DPS Foundation has done a similar training and program that we may hear more about. Well, I know we're going to hear more about it as a safety and task force liaison. I think they're in their second reading for a recommendation for a mental health, and you've heard about this, Commissioner Howerton, a mental health retreat for youth that will affect 6 different opportunities for that to happen. And then what does that translate to youth supporting other youth when they go back to their school community. So that will be an opportunity that the Safety and Wellness Task Force is on their second reading for a recommendation to us. You'll hear more about. And then the last thing I'll say is about our professional development and training. We also have a partnership with the Center for Child and Family Health, and they offer TILT training, trauma-informed leadership training as well, with the TILT training for our educators as there's time and capacity. I would love to see our educators funded for their time to be able to do that TILT training and get that additional that work happening. When I talked with the director for the Center of Child and Family Health, there are some barriers to getting the training done. There's not enough time, days in a week, but what if we could help to offset some of that with some sort of stipend to offer. And then last thing, I just want to thank Board Member Valladares for all of your support as well and helping with the Day of Remembrance and the prayer vigil and things you pulled together and continuing the conversation. Yesterday was just a stop. There's more work to be done. So thank you for telling us about the June 17th Latin 19 conversation that'll be happening. I look forward to more details about that and supporting as well. And lastly, to my colleagues and the DPS staff, thank you all so much for helping that dream become a reality, the visioning of the Day of Remembrance. I think it was a success by over 30 different organizations showed up and participated. The true success will be seen by the steps that people take afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. I'm going to conclude that portion of our agenda and have Durham Public Schools Foundation come on up to the podium. We're really grateful for the partnership we have with the foundation. I think be clear for community, we have Durham Public Schools and the foundation is its own entity, but we work in collaboration. Dr. Maddox Perry is on the steering committee for the Whole Schools Initiative. So there's a ton of collaboration between the two of us to make sure that we are supporting our students and our staff when it comes to their mental health and wellness. That wasn't included in our formal presentation, but we also have resources through our HR department to support staff when it comes to mental health. So looking forward to this presentation. I'm gonna pass it over to you, Ms. Gonzalez-Smith.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Umstead and Chair Howerton, County Manager Sowell and Dr. Pascal Mbenga, and to both boards. We really appreciate getting to be here with y'all. In many ways, this is going to be a continuation of the conversation that you all were just having, because as Chair Umstead said, everything that we're building with the whole schools is jointly led by the DPS Foundation, as well as Durham Public Schools with Dr. Maddox Perry, co-chairing that, as well as partnership with Duke Health. So excited to continue the conversation, get to dig in even more and touch on some of the great questions and things you all lifted up. I'm going to introduce my team, who is going to also share about this work, the folks who are really on the ground leading this. I am Megan Gonzalez-Smith, the Executive Director of the DPS Foundation. Taylor Outler is a program manager on our team and has been working with the whole schools work for over a year now. Also a quick shout out to Taylor. She graduated with her MPH from Carolina this weekend. So thrilled to have her full-time on the team now. Dr. Chris Soto, many of you know, who now is the director with Whole Schools over school-based well-being. And Erica Wilkins is the deputy executive director of the DPS Foundation and co-leads the organization with me. If we go to the next slide, we can move past this one. So again, many themes that we've already been talking about this morning, but Whole Schools is, we call it the Whole Schools Movement. And we launched this as a joint partnership between the foundation, which is an independent nonprofit that really galvanizes community resources to help accelerate the work that is happening in Durham Public Schools. a partnership between the school district as well as Duke Health. And then you can see the community leaders here, including Chair Umstead, who helped lead various parts of this big movement, as well as campaign. It does include a $3.5 million campaign that the foundation is leading fundraising for to help infuse additional support in this moment of crisis. One thing I want to underscore that we haven't touched as much on in the conversation so far this morning is that Whole Schools movement is really focused on addressing the mental health crisis facing young people, as well as the educators and staff in our schools. We are just as much focused on how we are really ensuring that the supports are in place for the mental health and well-being of the adults in the building, because we know that they carry so much as they are, the people who are the most on the front lines supporting our students who are really in a mental health crisis. We can go to the next slide. So this is really getting at the what needles we're trying to move with Whole Schools, what we're really focused on, and the how. And then we'll get into more detail of the strategies that we've been building out. But many themes here that resonate with what you all have lifted up around what we're focused on strengthening through the Whole Schools work, relationship skills, self-awareness, that sense of belonging. I feel like I belong in my school. That relationship to a caring adult, that has come up so much in y'all's conversation already. And that is so important that every student feels that they have a relationship to at least one caring adult in their school. And that self-efficacy, the confidence to perform their academic work, and those leadership skills for students. So that's what we're really focused on, tying a thread between every whole school strategy and these really important pieces that we need to strengthen for our students as well as adults in our building. We're going about that by really focusing on a whole culture of wellness in our schools, as well as the individual knowledge and skill building for people around mental health and well-being. We also have a big emphasis on peer-to-peer support that we'll talk more about, and connection to resources, something else that you all have brought up a lot, both connections to resources in the broader community and connection to resources in the schools. And so that's what we're really trying to tackle through the strategies. I'm going to turn it over to Erica, who will talk a bit more about the approach before Chris and Taylor get into the details of strategies.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning. Next slide, please. So next slide, please, actually. Our Whole Schools approach really is answering how can we galvanize all of the community and organize the community to pour into Durham Public Schools, students and educators, staff, and really ensure that every single school has a holistic, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive support system for everyone in the school community. And so we started this work with listening to the community, listening to students, to educators, figure out what they need for that to happen, and then also listen to community members. What do they need to actually pair their resources that they have to schools, to students, to educators? We did that spring 2022 to help create more of a holistic approach, a four-pronged approach that the team's going to talk more about, that we're piloting over these 3 years. So we just started this work and really working alongside Dr. Max Perry and her team to really ensure that we are embedding these practices in a way that will become sustainable for the district to continue after our initial 3 years work. And look at ways that we can scale this outside of the current pilot schools that we're supporting, and ensure that every single person in the district has the opportunity to have a safe support system that meets their needs. Next slide, please. So what this looks like is first, us honestly, as our Whole Schools team, is having a better understanding of what wellness actually is. And through those listening conversations, being able to understand that wellness is very multifaceted and includes ensuring that students and educators have social wellness, emotional wellness, intellectual wellness, financial wellness, physical wellness, and so many additional things. And through that, we created really a four-pronged approach that allows us, again, to support the great work that DPS is already doing and bolster that by having more community resources poured into the schools. And so we started that with our model schools. We have 2 specific schools that we're looking at from top to bottom, bottom to top. How do we, one, eliminate the stigma around mental health and wellness and make sure that every single person is having speaking within a culture that really uplifts mental health and wellness as being a key core fundamental piece of academics and feeling whole in the school. And so we're doing that at 2 schools that Chris will speak about in a moment. We also have our ambassador program. This is a peer-to-peer program that really focuses on ensuring that youth can connect directly with other youth and connect them to the resources that Student Support Services already has, as well as additional community resources that can support their individual needs. An additional layer of that ambassador program is adults, making sure adults know what resources are available and connecting other adults to those resources. We have our Whole Schools Fund. So every year, of course, we do our Innovation Grants Fund that provides grants directly to school. And additionally, we have our Whole Schools Fund that provides resources specifically related to mental health and wellness to schools. And so we'll look at a little bit around the numbers around that, but allows every single year for students, leaders, parent groups to apply for different grants that fund those specific projects around mental health and wellness. And then we have our community education series. And I look at this as community education and healing series. So what are our different opportunities at no cost for students, educators, for staff to come to us and be able to get training around supporting mental health and wellness, but also get their needs met so they can help others in the future. And so we'll look at a little bit about the wellness fairs that we've done in the past and a little bit of what we're trying to build on in the future to make sure that we can have that be as accessible as possible. Next slide. So far in just our first launch year, we've had a lot of successes that we want to build upon. So we've been able to meet about over 400 community members through our wellness fairs, making sure that they have education experiences that support themselves first, and then allow them to support others. We have been doing a lot of coalition building, right? Getting more community organizations to have more opportunities to support DPS students and educators and staff. And we have about 30 plus organizations that we pair directly with students and families, parents, to support throughout our events. We've given out about $115,000 in grants directly supporting mental health and wellness opportunities and projects at schools to about 23 schools. We also have a crisis support fund that is part of this as well, that responds real time to different crises we have in our community that are related to mental health and wellness. And then we've also done more deeper training through our mental health multi-day retreats, supporting about 50 students and educators to really learn more about health, wellness, supporting their needs and supporting others. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Soto to share more about our priorities moving forward and more of that progress.
So, hi, everybody. First of all, it's really wonderful. I feel so comfortable being here among friends. It's nice to see everybody. I wanted to start with a story, and this actually goes to Ms. Howerton's point earlier about destigmatizing wellness and mental health. There was a teacher that I was talking to a few weeks ago at Neal Middle School, and they shared this very brief story about a colleague of theirs who had been approached by a young person who had lost an aunt. And the child said, I just lost an aunt. And the adult, and this is not a judgment on the teacher, right? This is an issue that I think that we are in part trying to address, said, oh, okay, let's go to the school counselor, which is something that I probably would have done too at some point. But I think that there's a need that also Senor Valladares pointed out earlier, that 80% of this, right, is grounded and attempting to distribute our emotional experience across a school community, because that's the healthiest school community. We all know that negative emotions and positive emotions, for that matter, tend to end up either in the counselor's office or the disciplinary office. And so what we're really trying to do, and so I'm covering a little bit about the why before I get into the what. And sorry, I need to figure out where we're at. Could you go forward one slide? One more, please. Is really how to make sure that everybody in a community has the basic wellness skills to feel safe right? Both physically and emotionally within that space. Ms. Ward Satterfield mentioned the tiered support. I think we need to acknowledge where schools are at and ensure that we're addressing each one of these tiers with resources. But we also need to recognize that schools are best when we push that down to the tier 1 level as much as we can. I've always wondered, right, what it would be like to have a handbook of the self for children as they're growing up. And that's in part the issue of social emotional learning. The piece of that we're trying to address right now through whole schools, you can go to the next slide, is by providing those 2 basic components, relationship skills and self-awareness. And not just for school counselors and school administrators, but also for teachers who may be able to support because students have needs that are immediate that can be addressed by some basic foundational skills within the classroom. And so part of the way that we're going to be doing that is making sure that we are having professional development through our mental health ambassadors. And so the ambassadors are going to be located primarily at 2 schools for right now. The model schools that we mentioned earlier, and those are Neal and Southern. We're in the process of figuring out right now, we have 10 to 12 ambassadors that we're going to be trained at Southern, 10 to 12 ambassadors at Neal, and we're also going to be expanding that out. We recognize the need for community members to also be trained. We're certainly tying that to the recommendations from the state that we heard about behavioral health, in particular, the mental health first aid trainings. So every ambassador is going to receive some set of trainings, for example, mental health first aid, restorative practices, relationship mapping to ensure that every student has an adult in a community to whom they are connected. And so that is the overall thinking about our about the ambassadors program. That announcement is going to happen later on this week. We are also making sure that we're doing some basic education through our social media accounts to ensure that people recognize that there are ongoing attempts to destigmatize, right? What are some of the basic things that we need to know in order to build up that tier 1 area for students and additionally for staff? You can go to the next slide. This angle is just really interesting. So there are a few things that we want to make sure that adults in the building have access to as well. And so there are a couple of things that we're really going to be trying to do. Number one is, and I'm going to start with the foundation of the clinics that have surfaced even in this conversation. There is the clinic, the Duke Clinic at Southern. And so we've been working through Duke and through Principal Leathers and Southern to expand the hours and create a full wellness clinic that meets the kids where they are. We also want to expand the hours to adults because it's a wonderful space. And so we are looking right now at redesigning that space and lengthening the hours so that we can really respond to the needs of that community. We are also looking at doing wellness check-ins with staff, making sure that that wellness wheel, that we are addressing individual adult wellness before it gets to a point where what a wellness check-in actually means is there's something wrong, right? But how is your overall wellness as a human being? Because that's the kind of thing that we want to make sure that is modeled. We recognize that when adults get stressed, whether it's because of something having to do with their social world, their spiritual life, their physical well-being, then the people who are ultimately impacted are the students that they're attempting to serve. And so we want to make sure that adults come into that building and feel well also. I think that's it in terms of the ambassador program right now. We want to make sure that we are expanding into the community. We are going to also have not only educator ambassadors, but also youth ambassadors that are going to be recruited at the beginning of 2023 that will also be receiving some training on general well-being and health. I have spoken with Nurse Howard just a few days ago about the possibility of combining forces in the wellness clinic so that we're also having more traditional medical education as well. And then we're going to be recruiting ambassadors from the community to be able to support. Also, I just love the fact that we've already discussed a lot of these things and we're just layering this in practice. And for a better overview of what the community education series and the grants look like, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Taylor.
Next slide, please. All right. Hi, everybody, and thank you for the congratulations. All right. So I'm here to talk a little bit about our whole schools fund. Thank you. Okay. We love being 5'3". All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole schools fund. So the whole schools fund, as Erica mentioned, is kind of the mental health focused version of our innovation grants. So with the whole schools fund, we're really seeing what does it look like when we're going into the schools and we want to empower them to the things that they already know works in their schools. So what does it look like when we're giving them funds and we're able to provide support sessions and make sure they have continuous training of what are the more detailed things that are needing to be done, like evaluations and things like that. So with the whole schools fund, we've been able to give out over $115,000 to the schools, which is awesome. But we've also been able to support them along the way through a cohort model, which we hope to continue on into our next cycle. So these, you might be wondering, what are we funding, right? So these can look like peace corners. So each classroom has a space where students can regulate themselves. It can also look like a week filled of joy and wellness in their schools, or it can look like something of revamping their teacher spaces to feel more wellness centered. So we're providing these funds, checking in on them, and we're hoping to continue doing that into our next cycle, which is currently open. So if you know any caregivers, students, educators, staff in general that is wanting to step forward and lead within the schools, please encourage them to apply so we can provide funding for them. We can go to the next slide, please. All right, so our community education series. So far we've been doing two really robust approaches. The first one was our holistic healing festival. This was a space of just joy, but also showing what wellness can look like and different variations. So doing more conventional things like meditation or yoga, but also doing things that were new to people like flocking, which you may not know what it is, but it's organized movement, and also doing a group scream, because we found that a lot of people are holding a lot of trauma in. We experience trauma on a daily basis that's shared. One that everyone can think of immediately is COVID. That was a shared trauma experience with no release. So the group screen was a wonderful place for us to be able to just have a little prompt. Let's scream 3 times. Let's get it out and let's heal together as a community. The next event that was kind of more robust was our wellness fair. This is something I like to call a community conference. It was a space for different community organizations and members to share their expertise of things that related to wellness, well-being, and mental health as a whole. So at this space, we had different sessions that community members could sign up and attend. It was for students, but also for their parents to be in a shared space and talk about mental health together and what that looks like. And it ranged from things like, what is the science of breathing, right? Or let's talk about crystals. How is that healing? How does that relate to your wellness? And other things like that. We're also hoping in the fall to be able to bring back DPS Fest, and during that, have more of a mental health focus as well. So the activities that we're doing, the promotion that we're doing, the conversations that are going to be have, and the resources that will be present will all be able to tie a little bit to mental health and wellness. So that's a little bit about our community education. I will pass it to one of my lovely colleagues.
Next slide. So just to keep this a little concrete, we do have some things that are coming up. We want to make sure that is on everybody's radar. You can apply for a school grant, or not you specifically, you might not want to do that. People may apply for a school grant. That process is already open. I can tell you from personal experience, there's a lot of sharing and growth within those cohorts as they're communicating with one another under Taylor's excellent leadership. We also are going to be taking open applications for the ambassadors. That position, by the way, will be paid. And so there's a fairly healthy stipend because we want to make sure that we are giving teachers what they are worth. In addition to already the work that they are holding. And then we, as Taylor mentioned, are going to be having a DPS Fest on August the 20th. We really look forward to having people come out. We are going to be, excuse me, it's going to be big. That's all. And next slide. And so our general the whole schools movement really is about the conversation that we had earlier today, about distributing the idea of mental health and well-being across a school community and across the community in general. And I really appreciate your support, and you'll be hearing from us a lot in the coming days, weeks, and months. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for the presentation. Stay up there so we'll have any questions, comments.
I just gotta say this. I just gotta say this, the picture. Why is it all Black kids? Why aren't there diversity in that picture?
Some pictures from our events. If you look at pictures.
Miss, can you come to the mic? People are streaming, so the microphone helps make sure that people
Yeah,
can
sure.
hear.
Go back to that picture. It just like hit me like that there's no diversity at all in that picture. It's just all Black kids.
That's representative of what a majority of our events have looked like. These are all from whole schools events. So these are actual pictures from our events, but other pictures throughout the presentation also have some other diversity that also represent what our events have looked like. But these are some pictures from our events.
Yeah, it's just that when you do that,
Mm-hmm.
it appears that no one else has mental health issues but Black and brown kids. And I really take offense to that.
Noted. That's helpful to know that's how that comes across. Other pictures throughout show other representation. If we go back one or two to some of the community education events, it shows other students as well.
I'll go with Commissioner Carter, then Commissioner Burns.
I am so grateful. I am so grateful that we have the leadership of the Board of Education and staff for the mental health and wellness at our schools. And I'm so very grateful that we have a foundation in Durham that's focused on bringing the community together around and inside of our schools to make sure that they thrive. I mean, your last slide, our community, everyone in our community will not thrive until our public schools are thriving. And I just so appreciate your mission and your daily work. And I really want to know which MPH degree you got.
Health for concentration in health equity, social justice.
Wow, neat. Well, good for you. I feel really hopeful after hearing both presentations today that we're really going to make strides in Durham Public Schools. I just feel incredibly excited about that, like almost so excited that we should have a group scream. Okay, not who says no, ma'am. No. Let's see. I was happy to hear that you're paying for the ambassadors. I love the ambassador program. It reminds me a lot of the community health worker programs that we've had periodically now, in an effort to reach more members of the community and to inform, the work, the services that are being provided, because those people can sort of play a dual role. Will the students also receive a stipend? Yay.
Yes, they will.
That's awesome. And might one of the wellness fund projects, would a project that was trying to organize student peers at a school for peer-to-peer supports, but they wanted stipends for that program, might that be an appropriate type of program to apply to your fund?
Yes, and they also can apply for having their meetings, making sure they have food in those spaces,
wow.
transportation, so it is equitable across the board. We have a counseling program that's in partnership with someone here, but for the new counselors to be mentored by some of our more, I think they're at least 3 years in for counseling across some of the DPS schools, that's very similar. So they have that peer-to-peer support, but they also are able to convene and have food and also have transportation and a stipend for attending. So it creates spaces that are equitable across the board so everyone can come into the space on the same foundation.
Fantastic. We met a teacher from Hillside yesterday. Hardy Davis, what was his name?
Harper.
Yes. And he was saying that.
Davis Harper.
Don't tell him I butchered his name, but he was saying some great things about the leadership of students in his school. They spoke yesterday at the event, of course, and have been taking leadership actually for the anti-violence movement within the schools across our district at Hillside. And so he had some good ideas that involved stipends. So maybe you're probably already working with him on that. I love the relationship mapping. I'd never heard of that, but because I have always read when I've been trying to study and understand what helps children achieve in school, that connection to school is one of the maybe the biggest factor outside of the family at whether or not they're successful, in completing school and successful in achieving. And so that's really neat to be sure we're going to have safe, nurturing relationships with adults in every building for every child. You actually have a way of determining that through this relationship mapping tool. And I think expanding the clinics in the ways that you described is brilliant. And I'm so glad to hear that's happening. Our school-based health clinics, Durham was a leader in having those, I think, in this state. And I'm glad we're capitalizing on that even more so. So thank you, Chris, Taylor, Megan, and Erica for all your work.
Commissioner Byrne, oh, go ahead, Dr. Soto.
I'm sorry, before I forget, it's one of those things that I have in my notes and then you forget to actually say. I also just wanted to say that one of the important things that we want to make sure of is that we're collaborating with student support services, because we don't want to be going down two parallel tracks, not speaking with one another. We're actually having a meeting today, and I want to make sure that that's something that level of coordination is also really important as we understand better the systems that we're trying to put in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought that showed, from your presentation.
Commissioner Burns, Commissioner Jacobs, Commissioner Howerton.
I will try to be relatively quick. Based on my notes, I do have a few things, but I'm just going to bring up two. So I know that board member Lewis, I know that Chair Howerton and myself have all been made aware of the ask from the task force about I think a continuation of the program, the ambassadors program that you all currently have at Neal and Southern. And it's about, I think, somebody keep me honest here, I think it's about $180,000 for like 77 people. So at first, my consternation was not that I didn't want to do it, but there's a lot for a few people, right? And so now I do know that there's food and there's transportation and there's childcare, and it's 7 weeks, and there's like this holistic type of. So there's some, but what I would love to know are what have been some of the outcomes. I know we touched on a little bit, but what are some of the outcomes? And if I'm conflating two different programs, because you all might have more than a couple at Neal, by all means correct me. But I would love to know, because for me, when I think about it, I want to fund things that I know work. Not saying this doesn't work. So don't nobody lie on Commissioner Burns after this meeting and say, I said it didn't work. I said, I want to fund things that work. And so I'm always thinking about how we can change things systemically. Where some folks have said, well, no, Commissioner Burns, it's really good. Like, let us train this one teacher that can be in this one school, because that one teacher can plant the seed and then get the principal to do it and then get the students to do it. So that makes sense to me. So I do just want to know, like, what are some of the big outcomes? Because you all have worked with 50, we want to work with 70. I don't want to see 20 people maybe from the same school, or maybe just one person from each school. I don't know what the equilibrium is to make it effective across all 58 schools. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that. So that's the first piece. Just somebody to speak to that, or even email me. You're more than welcome. I like to read. My second question, I saw the teacher wellness spaces. I forget which slide it was on, but there was a notation that you all were working with Durham realtors. So I'm just curious. So you all are actually now investigating how you can get a real space. Is that what that's about? If somebody could speak to that, like, is an actual brick and mortar space for teacher wellness? And if that is it, I'm just curious. I just want to know, like, what would that be like? Not saying they don't need it. I see them doing the same thing at A&T right now. They're building something. Taraji P. Henson, I think, is working with 10 HBCUs to kind of sort of do these brick and mortar spaces for students, for teachers that are detached out of classrooms. So you can really have a space to yourself to do what you need to do to get yourself whole before you go back into that space. So if you all could talk a little bit about what those spaces might look like, or what that project looks like, that would be helpful. And those are just my two.
Great, thank you so much. So to your first question, a couple of things. One, the request from the Safety and Wellness Task Force is a request from that task force, not from us. So I can't, I'm not.
They were both at Neil, but okay, no, I thought they were the same one.
Mhm.
You're good, you're good.
Yeah.
So we can go on to the second one, Megan, you good.
Yeah. And in terms of evaluation, we agree. We also want to continue to do what works and to learn from things that don't work. So a lot of this year has been about beginning to lay the groundwork for the programming. We talked about, like Chris said, we're about to start recruiting ambassadors. So also part of our work this year is around building our evaluation plan and an evaluation team. That's also part of what the Duke Health System partnership is contributing, is research and evaluation support. So we're currently working with Duke Health on identifying some evaluators that they will contribute to evaluating the multi-year work that we described here. So more to come on that. The slide I spoke to early on with the needles we're trying to move, students' connection to a caring adult, sense of belonging at school, self-efficacy. We chose those partially based on things we do have data around, and that the district collects data around, so that we can measure those and look at what changes and what moves them. So that's a more to come on that. Teacher wellness spaces. So there are two different things. I'll talk about one of them, and then if Chris wants to say any more about the wellness clinic at Southern, which is going to be a more robust approach. But one thing we've done beginning at Neal and Southern this year, a few other schools applied for grants to do this, was to revamp their teacher break rooms to be more wellness oriented spaces that are really restorative. And so we did partner with some realtors through the Realtors Association, who brought in their stagers and their painters and physically updated the space. But Chris can speak a little bit more to the even more intentional and robust approach for the wellness clinic at Southern.
If you have questions about that,
No.
is that something that you want?
No. And thank you for that. No, I'm somewhat familiar with that one. I just was curious because once I saw realtors, it made me think y'all were looking at a space. But no, that's really the stagers to come in and just say, all right, we're gonna queer eye this whole space. You were gonna extreme makeover home edition. I think that's a great idea. So the 7th season of Queer Eye dropped this Friday. It's 8 episodes.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs.
I just want to echo Commissioner Carter's comments. I am really excited about the whole schools movement. and working in collaboration with, obviously integrated with Dr. Maddox Perry being a part of it, and just seeing, and Duke Health being a part of it. I mean, that's the direction that we need to go, where everybody is working together and systematically. I want to note the county, I think it was 250,000, is Claudia still here? That of our ARPA funds that we have actually are funding for the whole schools program. So I really like the idea that we are investing in the people that we have. I mean, that's what I heard today. I heard, talking about investing in our students, investing in our teachers. That's, to me, is a sustainable approach. Investing in the school-based clinics that we have, because, the bigger picture about school nurses, social workers, that's a national issue. I was just speaking with my husband, the fact that, the direction is going into nurse practitioners, not doctors. I mean, we're actually decreasing the pipeline of people, and Duke Health is, if you notice when you make appointments now, a lot of times you will not be seeing a physician, you will be seeing a nurse practitioner. And not to say that's good or bad, but to understand, and to your point, Giovanni, about other people that we can invest in. And when I see what's happening other places, other areas that we work in with the community health workers, and also I work a lot in the area of mental health, with crisis mental health, and the focus related to substance use disorder, and it's peer support. We are recognizing the importance of our people with lived experience. Bull City United is the same model. So I think investing in our people and people in our community is, to me, is the way to go. I was wondering about the role again with Alliance. I didn't see any mention of Alliance in terms of what you all are doing. Great to work with Duke Health, but so one of my questions is, how are you all working with Alliance? Because they are who we contract with the county for providing mental health services, and especially for people who are our most vulnerable residents who do not have health insurance, and who have some of the most complicated health needs, our foster children and some of our, DSS clients. So I think that's one of my questions that I'd like to know more about. And then both Emily and Heidi and I all talked to the group, the Students for Mental Health at Hillside, or it's at the New Tech, and they didn't.
At Durham School of Technology.
Okay, Durham School of Technology. Thank you. So my question is, how are we making sure that people know about the funding for the ambassador program and for whatever the school-based grants? Because they seem to be asking for exactly what this is going to provide, and they didn't seem to know about it. So I think that's going to be really important, how we get the word out about that resource. And then the last thing I just want to mention is I love the Scream and whatever the group movement thing. I want to mention, I don't know if you've all heard of laughter yoga, because we just, I helped lead a dementia awareness event a few Saturdays ago, and we had this woman named Lisa Levine from Dementia Minds who led, it was 100 people in a room, and we did laughter yoga. It was amazing. I did not know how healing, even for your physical health, the effects that laughter has on your metabolism, your brain, all these things. But we had 100 people standing up in a room doing laughing out loud and doing laughter yoga to get there. So I'll recommend her and that for your next wellness event.
So thank you on all counts. I could quote you some research studies if we had time about that. I'm going to say that, yes, we have actually all done laughter yoga. I'll start and go the other way. And so certainly we understand the benefits and want to continue to expand people's understanding of what wellness can look like. The question about Alliance, I actually am meeting with somebody from Alliance a little bit later on today. I had a conversation last week about the network of care, making sure that we are having conversations about how to put things on the site that give people immediate access based on immediate need, so that those resources are actually marketed as well as just existing. And I actually went to Durham School for Technology 3 weeks ago and met with those students because I was really moved by what they were doing. And we did share, there were some students who were not there that day. And so I'm not sure, but I can tell you that I will just exchanged emails with Mr. Harper this morning, and will continue to market the ambassador program in particular after it's launched a little bit later on this week.
I'm gonna go to Ms. Valladares, Ms. Howard. Oh, sorry. All right, I'm gonna get Chair Howard to Ms. Valladares and then Ms. Chavez. I'm gonna ask us to work on making our comments brief so we can make sure we end on time.
So I'm gonna have to jet in a minute. I got another call, but I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And Chris, especially thank you for addressing the stigma. The thing that I take away, it's a lot that I'm taking away from today, but one of the things is around the relationships. I'll share a little bit about that. I have a friend that her son was making straight A's in school, and out of the relationship with at home, his grades dropped to D's. He just went. And when he was asked what was going on, he said that he felt suffocated at home. He was not getting the support he needed. But he had a relative in the community that he started to stay with that relative. She went to the school to find out his grades. Not only did she go to school to check on with the teachers, he started to stay with her, and she put structure around him. He couldn't come home and go in his room and do his homework. He had to sit at the kitchen table and do the homework. So I share this with you in that when you talk about relationships in the community and the mentoring that we're funding this year as well, we're putting in funding for mentors. So I think I love the idea of having relationships that parents sometimes can't do it all, teachers can't do it all. The community has to help to do it all. So I thank you for that. And my only other question would be the ambassadors. What kind of training do the ambassadors have to have? If you could address that one.
So over the summer right now, and I wanted to shout out Lori McNulty from our from DPS professional development side. We are going to be including mental health first aid as a component of their professional development through Splash. And so that's one of the things that ambassadors are going to gain is the mental health first aid. And then I had mentioned relationship mapping and restorative practices. And then in addition to that, across the year, we're going to be meeting 2 times with the ambassadors per month for 45 minutes, recognizing their limitations, thus the stipend. But the first one is going to be a specific skill that they can take with them back into the community and serve as a hub for others who may want to learn a little bit more about that skill. And then the second 45-minute session is going to be deepening that practice and having conversations about how that skill's been working. And so that is not only going to be an upfront professional development, but also consultation and coaching along the way so that they can be that hub within the community that actually sort of strands out, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Valladares, Ms. Chavez, and then I'm going to close our comments on this topic.
Thank you. I have just a question about data. DPS, we have a very diverse community of stakeholders, of students, families. We have a great department, student research and accountability department that makes sure that our data is protected, that our students privacy, FERPA, just like in the healthcare system, you have HIPAA, but we definitely want to make sure that we keep confidentiality with the vulnerable data of our families. I'm always concerned every time I hear about, just interactions with researchers who may be having conversations around like how it serves them, but I always just, trust that those conversations that you're having with Duke Health. I want to know, like, are you working with ABC Collaborative on this? Is that the group that you're working with? Because I know that they're already going to do community schools. And during the time of the pandemic, I did not like that they never communicated to us that they were going to the state and pretty much put a mandate on us that forced us to open when we were getting ready to open on our own terms, but they never gave us a heads up. And that lack of communication undermines trust because then they're putting their agenda first and not our community, not our teachers, not our stakeholders. And there's always a coming back, right? So I'm not saying that that's the only indicative. Obviously, they were supportive, during the whole time of providing guidance, and all of that is welcome. But I just want for every single time any data that is going to be shared, our students' data, that I'm an advocate, and I will take my hat off as a board member to be an advocate if I have to, just to make sure that, if they are going to get data to the point of getting an IRB, like all that needs to be very much communicated, because that was their lack of communication initially where it was happening here, but the community didn't know what ABC was doing with the app, that they were trying to do screeners and they were trying to consent our families into other research projects that they had. And those screeners, right, we ended up doing our own screener, which served us because at the end of the day, we are DPS, and DPS primarily is looking out for DPS families and make sure that we safeguard that data. So I just want you to continue to communicate with us. I know that we will hold you to that communication in terms of like, what is the extent at which they're driving this versus you with our partnership, and ways that we can make sure that that communication is very clear about, are they consenting participants into research projects? Are they going to seek an IRB? Is this just evaluation purposes that doesn't require an IRB? And how are we driving this? Thank you.
So thank you. My one sentence, maybe two. My very strong opinion about educational research is that it has to be iterative, open, and not treat participants like subjects. And so I guarantee you communication on those points.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I want to make some general comments about both presentations. One, I just want to say that with all of this work, I really appreciate that this was our focus today. And I want to tie it back to, why we're here, also tying it back to academic outcomes, and just make the point that this is all, really to allow our students to be successful in all the ways that we want to see them be able to be. And, I would say that many of us have probably had times when we struggled with mental health, experiences that were difficult, that impeded our own academic or professional abilities. And so, I think with some of the strongest mentors for our kids are those who have that lived experience of moving through depression, anxiety, grief, all of those things. I just love the, like others have said, the focus on relationship. I want to say that with our restorative practices model, I've visited some schools and specifically asked to see their restorative practice centers and seen, really with the leadership of some of our staff to different degrees, it has been implemented, to different degrees with fidelity, I would say. And I think that with, with this work, with our continued, with the Whole Schools Initiative and also with our continued work with student services, this is a way that we're teaching restorative practices through people experiencing it, which is, I think, the best way to teach it. And I love that we're creating more ways to build community with and around our students. I also hope we will continue to expand those partnerships in the community. We have so many resources. So I love that we're doing that, and I hope we'll continue to. And also I wanted to say, just, with the county, I hope we'll, we have some, I hope we'll continue these discussions as well. And on slide 22 in the packet, there is a list of issues that come up regularly with our students, things that they, seek support around. It was kind of a parallel to the DPS Foundation, your slide 35, which is about emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, intellectual, physical, etc. So I was just thinking about ways that we're addressing all those specific issues and needs, and how we can dig into those more. I'm trying to be quick. And let's see. Also wanted to just say, I appreciate the attention to the effects of various forms of oppression that our students face, racism, classism, and poverty, and xenophobia. And I hope that we'll continue to dig into the disaggregated data from the Student Climate Survey to see how our students, our students of color, our students who are low SES, who are from the data we collect in ESL, all of that, how they are experiencing their sense of belonging, self-efficacy, some of the points, some of the metrics that were mentioned earlier. And the last thing I want to say is just around the importance of digital communication and digital communities, because that's so much where, our students are living. We don't just live in this, in-person space. And a lot of us, it's like, what do we do when we are idle? We look at our phones, and then we have, we all have digital spaces that we engage with. So I think continuing to spread messages around mental health resources and support in ways that are digestible on a digital format is important. And just think about ways that digital communities can enhance mental health rather than deplete it. We know that, the internet and social media can be spaces where people experience harm and trauma, but they can also be places where people connect and find community with one another. So thank you so much. I'm winded because it's my last one. But thank you so much for all your work, and we look forward to continuing to see how it's going.
Thank you, Ms. Chavez. Thank you, everyone, for all the presentations today. I think we all know that our youth are a responsibility. We feel a lot of care around that in our community, and this today really showed how many different folks are working to support young people and the adults in our community. I often tell people I love working in Durham because the community cares for the community, and that is evident here today. One of the students at the Day of Remembrance yesterday, Sam Scarborough, shared an affirmation that he learned when he was in elementary school. He said, "I am an infinite person with infinite possibilities." And I think about this work as reminding our students every day that you are infinite people. You are an infinite person with infinite responsibilities. And how do we help create the space to guide them and open the doors for all those possibilities? So thank you all for a great meeting. We're now adjourned.
She said adjourn, come on.